Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Tim Van Orden, and this is episode 21, Aliens on a Strange Planet. We'll be starting off with some Star Trek news, and then discussing Discovery Season 3, Episode 13, That Hope Is You, Part 2.
And then we'll get into our audience question right after our main topic, Aliens on a Strange Planet, which is discussing disconnection and reconnection, disorientation and reorientation in Star Trek and, well, in our lives. Stay with us.
Come join us. Enjoy your stay.
Enjoy your stay. Thank you for flying Gospel According to Star Trek Airlines. Doom!
So,
we
made it.
We made it.
End of a season.
I know, it's amazing.
We actually did this. Like, we stuck through it for the whole season.
For 23 weeks. I mean, we almost 23 weeks.
23 weeks. This is episode 21.
I know, but I mean, we started back in the first season of Lower Decks.
Yeah, but this is episode 21.
Oh, I know, but I was getting there. Like the 23 weeks of Star Trek was our tipping point. Like we're like, okay, we got a thing going, and then we kind of hated the first episode of Lower Decks and weren't sure we had a show for a couple of weeks.
Right, gotcha.
And so, but since then.
But this is episode 21.
Right, but we have covered all 23 weeks of 23 weeks of Star Trek in 21 episodes.
But why male models?
Because female ones, what?
Go on.
I don't even know where
it was a Zoolander reference. They apparently just went whoosh.
Oh, yes. I've never seen that movie.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Okay. And for those of you out there who have also never seen that movie, I feel your pain. I don't feel any pain. I don't have any pain for not missing it. All right. What are we doing? News. Hey, I've got an idea.
Uh-oh. I
have a new plan for this episode.
Wait, I think I know where this is going.
Do you? Is it because we've already recorded the top of this episode 3 times tonight?
That might be.
That might be it.
Do you, by any chance, are you wanting to recommend we do something new this episode?
New, like news, Star Trek news, because it's a Star Trek podcast. What a fresh idea! I knew it. Yeah, you have any Star Trek news?
No.
Okay, well, we're done here.
Yeah, so apparently Patrick Stewart has won Best Actor at the Critics' Choice Super Awards for Star Trek Picard.
Awesome!
Congratulations, Mr. Stewart. Sir Stewart.
Dude, I really think that's historic.
Is it?
I don't want to say that's the first acting award that's been won from Star Trek, but it might be. Like, that's always the thing. Star Trek gets all the special effects awards and the makeup awards and the costume awards and all that kind of stuff. Even though they didn't win the Oscar for makeup for Star Trek Beyond, and they totally should have. They made 50 new aliens for that movie.
Who'd they lose to?
I don't remember even. I don't even remember who they lost to. Because it doesn't matter, because Star Trek Beyond should have won.
Right.
But anyway, but they always win those awards, and it's like the writing and the acting and stuff is always is rarely ever even. I don't know if it's ever.
I mean, I don't understand that. I mean, they've got these like Dropper Zorn level actors in there, and they're not winning awards for acting. I don't understand why that could happen.
Hey, come on! They've also got the Brock Peters level and the Patrick Stewart level and the everybody else. All the good actors.
You ended with 2. You got to 2, one of whom I've never heard of.
My brain stopped. My brain stopped, and I couldn't say the words Avery Brooks, and so I couldn't get past that. I don't know why.
Man.
I just
this is turning out to be a great night for recording.
Is a great night. We're doing fantastic. We're professionals.
Hot diggity dog. Okay, so what's your piece of news?
My piece of news actually concerns Avery Brooks, which is totally not a plan to segue. It just happens to be the case. Because we're talking about great Discovery actors, great Star Trek actors, and of course, Avery books. So there's an article on this website, We Got This Covered, which is talking about an interview with Cirroc Lofton, where he says that, where he says of Avery, to say that he's not wanting to act is actually kind of ridiculous. There's no question that he's willing. So, and specifically that he's willing to work again if the right offers come his way. So it's actually possible, because this same site has reported that there is the potential of CBS reportedly considering a Deep Space Nine revival. Hello.
Revival?
A revival.
Isn't that what you do out in the church parking lot with tents and such?
Amen, brother. No, this is this is more of and we could talk about that, what revival actually is, but we'll move on before we get totally sidetracked. But yeah, so they talked about that, and that the network is thinking about doing something at least with Avery as Ben Sisko. And Cirroc Lofton has said, you know what, he's open to acting if the right role comes along, and he should know. They're very close. So, yeah, that's exciting. So it's potential. It's some potential. And it's also letting people know that Avery didn't give up on acting.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is episode 21.
Yes. And? I don't get it.
It's called a callback.
I don't get it.
To the start of the episode.
What?
Oh,
I don't get it.
Gosh. You ruined so many good jokes.
I don't know. That's because you will make a clever comment about something I just said, and I have just forgotten what I just said. So I don't get the joke.
Episode 21.
It is.
You even remember what we were talking about earlier, where we're like 23 weeks? And I was confused because it's episode 21.
You're trying to have a running gag. Oh, that's cute.
Oh, you're trying to have a co-host. That's cute.
Oh, boy. I usually laugh this hard before the episode starts. Oh, man. That was good. I'm sorry I missed that. I should have been more astute and aware. I'm sorry.
I'm used to it by now. That's steamrolling. So.
I take this. Oh my god! I take this job too seriously. What can I say? Oh man!
No kidding.
Speaking of things we take seriously, season finales. We always take season finales seriously around here.
Clearly, this is our first one. No, it's our second one. Because we got.
Yeah, we had 10 whole episodes of Lower Decks, and that counts as a season now. So yeah. We had 13 episodes of Star Trek Discovery, and how have you liked the journey?
It's been pretty good. I've enjoyed it. It's been a fun ride. I feel like I gotta say it hasn't been as. I was expecting something, I think, on a more grand scale.
Really?
It was the kind of the vibe I was getting at the start of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a lot more subdued. It's been a little more personal. It hasn't been quite as galaxy spanning as I was expecting it to be.
So, solving a mystery that literally spans the entire galaxy and fighting a conflict that threatens the very existence of the Federation isn't grand enough for you.
Well, I mean, it just didn't feel that way.
Well, I
didn't really feel like the stakes were all that high. Don't get me wrong,
okay.
I enjoyed the season. I thoroughly enjoyed the season.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really got the sense of the stakes being all that high. And maybe it's because it's so far in the future that it still doesn't feel like
real.
Our era of Star Trek yet.
Like, you don't necessarily feel like you have ownership of the 32nd century.
Yeah. It still feels like it feels like a time travel episode in another series where you're not terribly invested in what happens in the universe because you know that our characters are eventually going to go back, and I know they're not in Discovery, but I still have that residual sense of, oh, this is not where they belong. What happens here isn't as momentous as what happens in their prime time setting.
Well, kind of like when you go to a Mirror Universe episode. It can be a little difficult sometimes to be invested in those because it's a universe. It's not our, it's not our home. So,
And like I said, I loved the stories. I loved the season. I loved the characters. The ships were cool, but it lacked something for me. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Okay. Well, I know you were saying previously that you thought season 2 was your favorite so far.
Yeah, I enjoyed season 2. Season 2, the stakes felt real. For me, it carried a punch. It carried some weight, and I don't know.
Interesting. Well, I like that it was so interpersonal. I like. I felt like the concept that this grand galactic event, right? This huge galactic mystery. All came down to a very personal thing, a very, really a familial thing, right? And I liked that. It was something that was very essential and primal, and that it involved facing fears and dealing with grief and sorrow and guilt, and that it's not. There's a lot of sciencey science, bound up in it, right, to make it work. But it's not like there's not some grand conspiracy. There's not some natural phenomenon. It's not, it's something very weird and very personal. And I like that. I don't know that there could have been a solution in one of those other categories that would have been interesting enough. I think I would have a hard time coming up with something like that.
I think for me, I almost didn't really need to know what caused the burn. Like if they had gotten there and then the burn happens, sure, that's an immediate relevancy. But I don't know, it just felt like it was old news. It had already happened. Everyone had adjusted to it as best they could. They've moved on, and then Burnham comes along and just obsesses over it the way no one who lived it has apparently obsessed over it. And it just seemed unnecessary.
See, I don't see it that way because I think the whole thing is that, yes, people have tried very hard to figure this out and they haven't been able to, but also they're in survival mode and they're not functioning very well, and they haven't been functioning very well for more than a century because of this. And so I think it's very much that the Federation's never going to be okay. It's never going to be restored. We're never going to be able to fix anything until we figure out what got us here and see if that provides us a way back to some stability. If we, and I think that's Burnham's whole position, her whole mindset. And I think Vance shares that perspective. He just is taxed. He doesn't have the resources to be able to look into it the way he wants to. And once Discovery comes along, he can, which, contributes to this sort of cosmic purpose for Discovery, which it keeps having.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that there keeps being this this greater purpose, this greater reason for Discovery. In the first season, it felt so, everything about the ship and everything about it felt out of time. It felt like it didn't quite belong. And now that they're in the 32nd century, I think they finally do belong. And I don't know. I think it gave it a purpose. So that's fair. That's my perspective. So
cool.
Yeah. That's a little bit broad, though. What about the episode at hand? Did you feel like it was a good summation for the good closer for the season?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think it was pretty good. Yeah, I liked Vance and Burnham at the end there.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope that they're like. I acknowledge your point that you knew they had started on season 4 because Doug Jones had shaved his head.
Right.
But I don't know how I feel about Michael being the captain now. I liked Saru as the captain.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a thing. I really love Saru. I really love him. So it is a bit like I'm really happy for Michael. Mm-hmm. I get really excited watching the end. I've seen that last scene a couple of times, and I flipping love it.
Yeah,
jazzes the heck out of me. I love the new uniforms.
Yeah, those are sharp. I like those awesome color stripe on there.
Oh yeah. See, this is one thing I love is like re-embracing the bright colors.
Uh-huh.
That excites me. Because even in recent times when we have embraced bright color, like in Star Trek's 2 through 6, it's all red, right? You know, and so since TNG, we haven't really had those bright colors, and I really like that. And it also makes departments more clear and all that. But they do seem awfully formal with those jackets, and I'm thinking like, is this the everyday uniform? Like,
yeah, is this what they're going to go traipsing through the trees in and traipsing through the desert? Yeah.
So I'm like, this looks like a dress uniform. It is so pretty. I'm telling you, their costume designer is incredible.
Yeah.
She is just phenomenal. But we can talk more about that next episode. But
okay.
What were the standout moments for you in this episode? What did you like most?
Standout moments. I liked the fight on the
turbo lifts.
The turbo lift. Thank you. Yeah.
That was crazy.
She is a queen. Yeah. No, that was. I loved seeing the inside of the turbo decks. It makes me wonder if that's what they look like in like TNG era, and I kind of doubt it.
I doubt it too.
But I really liked that.
I think that's 32nd century version. I think a lot of the ship has been upgraded and refit, and I think that's what 32nd century. Because the idea that the turbo lifts go up and down and side to side, and they go any direction you want, has been around in Star Trek for a while,
right?
But it hasn't always been explored that well. I really appreciated that there's no hatch in the top of them. Because in all the movies and everything, there's an escape hatch in the top of the elevator.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And real elevators don't have those.
Okay.
And so I just thought it was cool that they didn't lean on that movie trope and just found another way for us to get around outside. I don't know. That's just kind of a...
I really liked seeing... It looked like the bridge was just kind of suspended there, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought that was really cool, and it dawned on me, when you've got this sort of an interior setup, you don't have to have things attached to each other.
Yeah.
It was just really weird seeing it like that. It was cool. That was cool.
It was very cool. I enjoyed those. I enjoyed those sequences. I thought they were really well done. I really loved the scenes between Saru and Su'Kal in this episode. I loved the way Saru was able to connect with Su'Kal. I'm going to miss seeing Doug Jones' face, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I love Saru, but I'm going to miss seeing Doug's face because he really has a beautiful, expressive face. And I thought Bill Irwin was fantastic in those scenes. And there's a great... I felt like the rhythm of it was really good. Olatunde Osunsanmi was the director of this episode. He's one of the showrunner guys, one of the producer people. You know, when you watch the behind the scenes stuff on the Ready Room, the interviews, you have Michelle Paradise, and then there's the other dude with the big thick glasses that comes up every now and again. That's Tunde.
Okay.
And he's so it was really cool. I think he's directed some episodes before, and Michelle wrote this episode as well. And yeah, I thought it was. I just it had so many great moments, so many great character moments, and I think it all came to a conclusion really nicely. I thought it was pretty beautiful.
Yeah, it all wrapped up really well.
Mm-hmm.
And not in any way that felt too forced or anything. It was a good ending. The fight with Michael and
Osira.
Mm-hmm. It was pretty good. Yeah, I think I'll say that it was pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, I liked their dialogue best. You know, that was the best part of that. You know, when when Michael comes in and Osira's already there, you know, and she says, "I'd have come here too, smart." And Michael says, "Your approval means everything to me." I love it. Michael just being salty, being awesome. It was great. But I also love, and I love too that, you know, we really show that Osira has turned that corner. You know, she's made that choice. When Michael's telling her it doesn't have to be like this. She says, I already tried with Vance. I won't make that mistake again.
Right.
And you know, and then when Michael emerges from that, whatever that computer console is that she shoved her into.
That was strange.
It was like, but I did love that she came out coughing stuff up.
Yeah.
But she says, "Yeah, well, unlike you, I never quit," and I think that was really interesting. Like, you know, I again we've talked before about like what really is the strong thing to do, right? And we talked about it specifically with Osira and Vance, that the strong thing for Osira to do is to sacrifice herself for her cause. The strong thing for her to do is to step back and allow somebody else to take this forward and to face the consequences of her actions. But she doesn't. She really chooses the weak way. And I feel like that line from Michael sort of puts a button on that, you know, and says, and it feels like this strong thing from Osira, like, oh, that's the last time I do that because, you know, I'm too good for these people who won't cooperate with me. And Michael's like, yeah, well, unlike you, I never quit. You know, she recasts that as quitting, as giving up too easily. And I think she's right.
Yep. You can't see me nodding here
No, I cannot see you nodding.
Concurrence.
Yeah. Maybe we should be doing these on video.
Yeah. Yeah,
No.
Dude, my hair is like down to my shoulder now.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's ridiculous.
I want to see that. I want to see what you look like with long hair, sir. That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll see. So yeah, it was an enjoyable episode. I really liked that the monster at the end was just trying to get him to see
face fear.
Face the fear, yeah.
And I had that in mind that like it could be his mother in some form, but I couldn't see how that would really work. You know, I just thought it'd be cool because it's clearly Kelpian. Yeah. And you just kind of want it to be his mother. But it was leading him to an encounter with the loss of his mother, the memory of his mother. And that's such a big thing that is the core of Su'Kal's journey. Which, 125 years. 125 years. He's been
I didn't realize Kelpians were that long lived.
No kidding. That makes him 130 years old because he was around 5 when his mom died. So, like, how old is Saru? I don't even know.
Yeah.
It might be on Memory Alpha. We might find it out somewhere, but 130 years old, this guy. But I just find it interesting that, you know, he's spent that long. Which I guess to a Kelpian might not be nearly as long as it is to us. But he's spent that long trying to avoid this. Trying to shut it away. And what great what an act of strength it was. You see the weakness that Osiris showed. And yes, Michael showed strength, a certain kind of strength that we easily recognize because it was forceful. But what about the strength that Su'Kal showed just in talking to Saru about what it is that makes him afraid? And
it's back to that theme from earlier in the season. It's okay to be not okay.
Yeah, and that admitting that and talking about it is the first step. And so, when he says end program, that's huge. That's huge, but he had to get there. And Saru gave him the space and the time to get there, even though time was of the essence. Anybody else could have gotten really urgent with him. And, like when Gray comes back and says, if he has a solution, we need it like now. Like we gotta hurry. His place is gonna fall apart. And but Saru is able to urge him along, nudge him along, lead him along, but very, very gently, and as though they have all the time in the world. And I thought that was just so beautiful. And it just shows Saru's strength of character and his sensitivity, his real compassionate sense that he has, which I think is beautiful and makes him such a great leader. There's another reason I wish he was still captain. But that, it's one of the things that he says, the thing that Saru says to Su'Kal is that he has to make, he says, you have to make a leap of faith. That's what he calls it. And I think there's a lot of leaps of faith or acts of faith that are involved in this. We have the act of faith that, first of all, that Saru has to take, that we can get Su'Kal through this journey and get him to do what he needs to do, but also the act of faith that Su'Kal has to take in ending the program and facing his fear and allowing himself to move on. That's huge, and he has to make that leap.
Well, there's Vance has to trust Burnham when she asks him to let them out. Then you've got Burnham having faith that the crew will come through with the mission that she's kind of sent them on. The crew has to have faith that she's sent them on a mission that's important here to regaining the ship. And then I think there's one point where she says something along those lines to Book, where she jumps out of the elevator.
That's the thing I'm thinking about. It's not the jump out of the turbolift, but I'm thinking about the thing with Book, where we really have to have faith that Book's going to be able to jump the ship. That he's going to be able to. Because we're just going to blow everything up and hope Book can get us out. Right. And it's that, and it's interesting too that she's telling him, Book, jump, just like talking about leap. Yeah, you were talking about leap of faith, right?
But I like, it's kind of I feel like it was an intentional callback to earlier when Book was talking about those on his planet, those creatures. He can't tell them to move. Right. He asks them to move.
He asks. Ooh, yeah.
And so she's sitting there telling him, jump, jump, jump. And then it's not until she asks, please, that he's able to complete the jump.
Ooh, that might have something to do with it. I hadn't caught that. That's pretty good. But that is interesting. And so, I mean, that is very interesting that Book was able to do it, first of all. And that, again, I mean, he, like you said, he had to ask for that. He couldn't force that to happen. So he himself, I mean, we're not just putting our faith in Book, but Book is also putting his faith in the mycelial network.
Yeah.
To be able to do that and carry him. So there was a lot of that in this episode, and I really enjoyed that theme. I really enjoyed that happening. Of course, that happens a lot in Star Trek. I mean, it's a huge thing in Star Trek. Faith is Well, I mean, that's why when we did Enterprise, it was Faith of the Heart for the theme.
Right.
Because that really is a huge, huge theme in Star Trek.
I mean, that was just the most massive leap of faith to take your Warp 5 starship and start exploring space. That's a massive leap of faith
huge.
Right there.
That's huge.
I need to watch Enterprise again. It's been a while.
Enterprise is great. Yep. What else do we like about this episode? I thought you were about to say something.
No, I was just thinking.
I was going to say I was very interested too in another way that one of the themes of the season kind of had a moment with Gray. When Gray is not expecting to be seen. I love that he shows up as a Vulcan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He makes a great Vulcan. I'm like, you should keep him Vulcan. He's cool that way.
Nice.
But when he gosh, didn't Adira look? I don't know what species Adira was.
Yeah.
What species were they? Because it was beautiful, like face coloring and everything. But it, were they that species that what is the character's name? Poe from the short treks with Tilly?
Yeah. Well, and she was in the second.
She was in the second season as well. Yeah. I think her name is Poe. Is that it? I don't know.
That doesn't sound right.
I may be like you and I'm drawing from Star Wars again. But but anyway, I think was it that species? Is that who it was?
Now that you mentioned that, I feel like that's what the intent was there.
That's cool. I really think that is it because the eyes and everything. Anyway,
and the implication there is that species went on to become a Federation member.
Right. Bang on. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Oh, this is fascinating. Oh, I'm going to have to dig into that. That's so cool. But yeah, they look beautiful like that.
That was pretty cool.
That was gorgeous. But the thing is, Gray, so he comes in and he's like, you can see me, Mm-hmm. And I kind of forgot what it felt like, and getting a hug from Hugh and all that, which was beautiful. But there's that moment at the end when they're about to end the program. And Gray, I mean, in all honesty, Gray has a little moment of selfishness there, but you can't blame him.
Oh no,
at all. But he's like, once he turns off the holo and Adira tells him, I'll still see you, and he says it's not enough. I'm stuck. Tal is stuck, and to go back now, knowing what I've been missing, and. Mm-hmm. Paul says to him, we got you, Gray, okay? Adira, Paul, me, we'll find a way to help you be seen, truly seen by everyone. Did you read something in that scene? Because I did.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right. Because I think it's very intentional. I think the idea of visibility is so important, I think, just sort of ethically to the people making Star Trek right now. But then also, I think it's there sort of within the context of the narrative of not just with Adira and Gray, but with so many people who are different in one way or another, being seen for who they are, being seen for what they are, and being accepted. And that's so important to anybody who is an outcast, right? Anybody who is... maybe they are having trouble reconciling with themselves or presenting themselves as who they are to the people around them because of the fear of rejection and all that sort of thing. It's such a huge thing to be seen and known, to be visible, and to not only see that other people are okay with that, but to be okay with that yourself. There's something in that about owning your identity that is so important. And I think that moment was really meant to speak to that.
Yeah, I agree. It was very well done, very well. It was on point
and intentional. I think it's very very much the intention there. So because it's something that I had not thought about with Gray's character to this point. The idea of visibility and being seen. I had not thought of that, and I think that's really important. So That was really cool. It was a great moment. Anyway, but okay, so the other thing that we come back to in this episode also is fear. And of course, I think that need for visibility, I think, does come to fear. And think also about, in other words, we need to be seen for who we are, but it's hard to be because we are afraid a lot, because other people make us afraid. But on the other side of it, when the creature is going back through the door, the last word it says before it kind of de-reses on the other side is see. And it wants Su'Kal to see. And so again, it's like it's overcoming fear in order to be seen, right? I mean, it's kind of a subtext there. It's not really necessarily part of the story, but it's an idea that's there in the gray angle when we translate that into the real world. But then also overcoming fear to see. And that theme of fear and of facing fear, confronting it and overcoming it, is really, really big, and is really at the core of Su'Kal's story. And there's that great moment when Su'Kal says, "I'm afraid to turn off the holo," and that's where Saru tells him, "I know it is hard, but you must take a leap of faith." And then tells him that the structure is failing, and then Hugh says to him, "Su'Kal, you're okay. I know you don't feel that right now, but you are, and it's okay to be afraid." Su'Kal says, "The elder used to say that." And then Saru says, I think the line of these two episodes, "Even in fear, Su'Kal, you can still step forward." Boy, I think that's super powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's incredibly great, because it's really easy. I mean, what we've heard said over and over, that courage is not being without fear. It is having fear, but acting anyway, right? And
right.
So that's what we see here with Su'Kal. We really see courage overcoming fear, and Paul telling him, "You are okay. You don't feel it, but you're okay." That's really interesting to me. And saying it's okay to be afraid. It came back to my to our previous episode about it's okay to be not okay. It's okay to be afraid, and you are okay. You are safe, even though you don't feel you are. You're going to be all right, even though you don't feel it right now. And so I'm just gonna say this. I was gonna do this in the episode Su'Kal a couple episodes ago. But there's this, I wouldn't necessarily call it a poem, but there's this passage from Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke, and I referred to it actually in my Advent series. Mm-hmm. But I'll just say it, because I feel like this moment, this Su'Kal story, was such an embodiment of this. "How should we be able to forget those ancient myths that are at the beginning of all peoples? The myths about dragons that at the last moment turn into princesses. Perhaps all the dragons of our lives are really princesses, who are only waiting to see us, once beautiful and brave. Perhaps everything terrible is, in its deepest being, something helpless that wants help from us. So you must not be frightened if a sadness rises up before you, larger than any you've ever seen. If a restiveness, like light and cloud shadows, passes over your hands and over all you do, you must think that something is happening with you, that life has not forgotten you, that it holds you in its hand, it will not let you fall." And I just feel like that is, if you could just take this story of Su'Kal and make it into a poem, that's what it would be. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's been in me for, almost 30 years, and I've quoted it to all kinds of people in all kinds of situations. because I always hang on to that reminder that we are held in a hand that will not let us fall, that God indeed has not forgotten us. But it's just something is happening with us, something new, something different, and that can be really scary. And just like Hugh tells Sakal, I know you don't feel it, but you really are okay, and it's all right to be afraid. But you can either let that fear win, or you can move forward. And you can be afraid, Saru says, and still take a step. And boy, that's powerful. That's huge, and I think it means so much. I think it means so much for all of us, because I think there's so much fear that we have to confront, and there's so many things that can feel insurmountable. And I think we've all dealt with a good percentage of that over the past year. And it's good to know. I think it's good to know that we are held in a hand that will not let us fall.
Amen.
Yeah. I mean, I know Rilke isn't scripture, but hey, when it rings true, it rings true. All truth is God's truth, right? All goodness is God's goodness. All beauty is God's beauty. So I find goodness, truth, and beauty in that passage and in the story of Sakal, which I think is really important. And I think it's great that I'm changing subjects. Is that okay? I feel like you don't have anything to say on this. Okay.
No, go for it.
Sorry. I always want to make sure. Don't want to steamroll you.
Yeah.
I think it's great that Saru is going to be mentoring Sakal on Kaminar, because I think Saru has been needing to go back to Kaminar for a long time.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a thing that has needed to happen, and he needs to see Kaminar as it is now in the 32nd century, and how it has adapted as a member of the Federation.
Yeah.
And he needs to reconnect with that part of himself, with his roots, and I think Sakal is going to help him do that.
Agreed.
So it's kind of okay. So it's kind of okay that he's not in the captain's chair.
I mean, yeah. If at least they didn't kill him off or something,
right?
It's
and
he's still doing Saru stuff,
right?
I guess
he's doing Saru stuff, and not only is he doing Saru stuff, he's doing stuff that's important for his character growth, and I think that's great. I think it's absolutely great. I love when Star Trek, I think back to the TNG episode Family. I love when Star Trek says, yeah, we have lives outside of Starfleet, and those are important too, and we have to process some things and deal with some things, and sometimes we have to go home again. I think it's really good. The thing that Saru says to Sakal, the other line that Saru says to Sakal that really stuck with me, was when Sakal was going to end the program, and Saru says to him, this part of the journey is yours, but I will not leave you. I could not help but think of Jesus. I could not help but think of Jesus right there. Which, because I think we think of Jesus' words, I will not leave you or forsake you. And sometimes we can feel so alone. And I know there's that thing with the footprints in the sand, right? Those times when you see the one set of footprints is the times when I carried you. And that's not wrong. That's not wrong, but another way to look at it too is, as a parent, you have to, kind of step back and let your kid do some things on their own, but you never leave them. You're never not there for them, and I think when we face these things, sometimes we can feel alone. We can feel like we're on our own, and yes, in a certain sense, we're never alone, right? Even though this is a thing that Sakal has to do, that nobody's going to hold his hand and put it where it needs to go, right? Nobody's going to stand over him and make him do it. He has to do it from within himself. But Saru is right there, and I think it's great too when he turns around and he sees Saru for the first time as a Kelpian. And
that was, I liked that moment. That was a little goosebumpy.
Oh, and he says, you are real. And I just, Lord haste the day when my faith shall be sight. I just feel like So he stepped out in faith, and then was able to realize that the person he trusted to be there was there. And I think that was beautiful. I think that was absolutely gorgeous. And I think that it doesn't happen. I don't know. It depends on your experience. Speaking from my own experience, it doesn't happen often for me necessarily, where I have those moments where I'm like, oh, wow, like I really have an assurance that what I have faith in is really true. I don't have that a lot, but when I do, it's like that. It's like just turning around and seeing something and seeing someone who you'd hope to see and finding out, yep, I've been there the whole time. Don't be afraid, or be afraid, but move forward. I think that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feel the fear and do it anyways.
Yeah. And certainly, I think of the angels saying, be not afraid, but, in other words, don't be afraid of us. Don't be afraid of God. Don't be afraid of this thing that's coming, but it's okay to feel fear sometimes. It's all right. Just don't let it control you. So, speaking of fear, I think the big theme of this season really came to fruition in this episode, and I'm just gonna read the lines that Michael says at the end of the episode. Mm-hmm. Disconnection. That's how this future began. One moment in time that radiated outward until no one remembered that connection was possible anymore. But it is. The need to connect is at our core as sentient beings. It takes time, effort, and understanding. Sometimes it feels impossible. But if we work at it, miracles can happen. Dude, do you remember what a hardcore naturalist science what is it? Scientific thinker Michael was last season?
Yeah.
And here she is saying miracles can happen. Something's happened in Michael Burnham.
I would concur.
Yeah. I think Michael has, and I think there was an imbalance and there was a disconnection in her. We saw that change in her in that year we spent away from her. And all of you saying, "Oh, that's too much change for 1 year." You underestimate humanity by saying that's too much change for 1 year. I've seen a lot of change in people, and I've seen a lot of change in myself, and sometimes less time than that. So, but yeah, we saw that, and she had kind of tipped to the other end of the scale, and she needed to find balance within herself, and she did. In this season, she found that. I think this is her. I kind of think of what we talk about with the postmodern shift, that that pre-enlightenment. I mean, this is very, very rough and very raw, and not really. It's very. There's all kinds of nuance that we're skipping over here, but like pre-enlightenment, you could call an age of mysticism, right? And then post-enlightenment is like an age of reason. We have mysticism, and then you have enlightenment. And then we start realizing that reason or modernity doesn't really actually answer everything and can't answer everything. And there's more to our existence. And so the postmodern shift happens, and we come into what might be called an enlightened mysticism. And I'm borrowing this from a former pastor. This is not my own. But I do think I think that's true. And I think that's kind of where we live best. I think that's where Star Trek lives best. And I think that's the balance that Burnham has found.
Fascinating.
I think. But I think it's great that they came back to, at the end of this episode, that theme of disconnection, and that reconnection is possible. It feels like reconnection is impossible, but it is possible. And connection is possible. And I think that's what this season has been all about. Finding connection, finding connection with one another, and with something greater than ourselves, which Hugh refers to as the Federation, which is fine, the Federation, but I think that's a little limited. there, Hugh Culber. I think we can think a little bigger than the Federation as something larger than ourselves that we can be a part of. But finding that connection, that reorientation is the key to this whole season. I think it's great. It just feels like, when we jumped to the 32nd century, I thought, this is where we belong finally. But it's like now we've really come together. We have a place. We have a purpose, and we have a new captain yet again.
Yeah.
And
how many captains has this ship had now in the last 3 seasons?
4.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had Lorca, we had Pike, we had Saru, we had Tilly. Well, I guess Michael's.
Oh, you're forgetting Giorgio. Giorgio was the first one.
She was the captain of the Shinzo, not the.
Oh yeah. Good call. Okay.
But she is another captain we have had in the series.
Right. That's
true.
Actually,
Michael is the 5th captain of Discovery. That's pretty crazy.
Yep.
So it was great that they ended the season, and the episode and the season with that quotation from Gene Roddenberry. And I'm just going to be reading a ton of stuff this episode. What can I say? But I don't know where this quotation came from. I haven't looked it up yet. But I'm all about the Gene Roddenberry quotations. The first, after the introduction, the first 4 chapters of my book are all about Gene Roddenberry. And a huge thing that I did during researching Gene Roddenberry and his worldview was tracking down the sources of and debunking a couple of quotations of his, one of which made it into the book. And that's the malfunctioning brains quote. If you've heard that thing from Gene Roddenberry, that is a big, interesting ball of twine that I unraveled for you. So go check it out in the book, because you learn a lot about Gene Roddenberry by unraveling that quotation. But this is apparently a good, solid quotation, and it gives us our title for our episode. And so herein we transition to our main theme. In a very real sense, I could read this in the Gene Roddenberry voice. Do you want me to do that?
No.
Yeah, okay. In a very real sense, we are all aliens on a strange planet. We spend most of our lives reaching out and trying to communicate. If during our whole lifetime we could reach out and really communicate with just 2 people, we are indeed very fortunate. So we chose that title, Aliens on a Strange Planet. I think that's a really interesting idea that Gene had there. That there is a sense in which we do long for that connection, as though we are aliens. In Christian subculture, in certain parts of Christian subculture, the idea that we are aliens, that we are not of this world. In fact, there's a whole T-shirt line, NOTW, not of this world, is very, very popular. I think of Larry Norman. Those of you who are familiar with Christian music will remember Larry Norman from the 1970s, one of the big founding fathers of CCM, who was well known for a record called Only Visiting This Planet. The idea is that our home is in heaven, right? Our home is not here, which I think overlooks the biblical concept of the renewed heavens and the renewed earth, that this creation, this planet is restored and renewed, and that's where we live out an eternal existence. If you take all that literally, that's up to you. But one way or another, God gets what God wants, and all of creation is restored by Christ. That's how it looks. That's how it is. That's I think the ultimate truth of Scripture. But it's a different sense, right? It's a different sense of being an alien. It's that I'm an alien, but my sense of that's because I don't belong here. My sense of belonging is elsewhere. My home is not here. Heaven is my home, and I almost and that leads to that sort of misapplication where I think Johnny Cash recorded a song called "No Earthly Good," talking about people who are so heavenly minded they're no earthly good. So focused on the there and then, if you will. Mm-hmm. That we're not looking at the here and now,
right?
And there's what's called, I talk about this in the book, the already not yet salvation. That there is an alreadiness to salvation. There's a way in which we are already saved, and yet there's a way in which not yet. There's a sort of culmination that we're looking for, the ultimate time when God gets what God wants, and when my faith shall be sight, as Sukal had that experience in this episode of Discovery, and as we can talk about in other parts of Star Trek. But there's a here and now that we often overlook. And I think the sense of alienation and the sense of connection that Gene Roddenberry is talking about is, again, I think it speaks to the sacredness of the ordinary, and that we can find real, true, and deep connection with another human being simply because they're other human beings who are also on this planet, also on this same journey, also looking for connection. And we really can find that if we open ourselves to one another. And again, we often have to face our fears in order to do that. But once we do, turning to someone and saying hello can change your life. That can be both an inspiring truth and a frightening truth. But, I find that really profound. I find that really beautiful that there is a wholeness, and there is a taste of heaven, if you will, that we can have now, simply by connecting with one another, by really connecting, by really listening, and by really opening ourselves to one another.
And it's something it's so hard to do right now, but it feels like it's something we so desperately need to remind ourselves to do.
Yeah. It takes a little more intentionality now, doesn't it? Because it's not an ordinary thing to get on a Zoom call with somebody.
And we think we have that connection. We think we have Facebook and Twitter and all these other forms of staying in touch with people, but it's not there. It's empty calories.
That's a really good way to put it. I like that. And there's a falsehood to it, right? I mean, there's some connection there, but there's also some distancing. It reminds me again, I go back to it so often, but Contact, one of my favorite science fiction films, one of my favorite films of all time. And Palmer Joss, Matthew McConaughey's character, is on TV. I think he's actually being interviewed by Larry King. And he's, it's 1996, so forgive the the dated language, but he says, we shop at home, we surf the web, but we're more cut off and more distant than we've ever been before. We're more connected and yet more disconnected. That's 25 years ago, people starting to see that and realize that. And how have we coped with it at this point? And yet these tools that we use for this sort of false kind of connection are also the tools that are often what we have to use right now to be able to find real connection with one another. I'm reminded of the Fred Rogers quotation: "The greatest gift you can give another person is your honest self." And I think remembering that can help us overcome the fear that's involved in doing that.
I feel like this is what Sybok was all about.
Speak to me.
In Star Trek, he was telling them to give them their pain, right? Like Culber is saying to Gray, like you were talking about that whole needing to see them. It was just, he was giving them someone who saw them and acknowledged their pain and said, yes, this is valid, this is real, and that he's making that connection there.
Well, and it's not unlike what we're talking about of facing your fears too, right? And confessing, a confession, right? We talked about that before with Sybok, and I think you're bang on about that. Again, I think it's written poorly. I don't think it works really well.
No, that's fair.
But I do think that's what Sybok is getting at. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that's in there to be mined if the film were written better. But yes,
fair.
Yes, absolutely. Sybok is about that. I've also thought this whole flipping season, I keep bringing up Star Trek Beyond. When you and I are talking about what are we going to talk about this episode, and I go, well, we could talk about Star Trek Beyond. I've done that
Yeah, and I keep waiting for you to actually reveal your
do that, right?
Connection here, yeah.
Well, Star Trek Beyond is all about this. It's all about this disjointedness and this disconnection. When we talked about the similarity between Osira and Edison before. We talked about that an episode or two ago. But also, and that sort of choosing who you're going to be, choosing what inner voice you're going to listen to. Reminds me of a meme. I'm sorry, this a meme I saw online. It's this picture of Miles O'Brien. He's smiling, and it says, "Within you are two wolves. Sorry about the transporter malfunction." Sorry. But you know the thing I'm talking about with the two wolves, and you the one that wins, the one you feed. But I love that. I love that meme though. Sorry, I had to drop that in. But we see that with Osira and Edison, but we also see that the crew gets dispersed in Star Trek Beyond. They're cut off from one another. They can't find each other. The Enterprise gets killed and destroyed. I mean, it gets killed dead. And there's that conversation when Spock is sort of recuperating and Kirk is sitting at his bedside and he says, well, his couch side, whatever, but he sits there and he says, "What are we going to do, Spock? We got no ship. We got no crew. How are we going to get out of this?" And Spock says to him, "We will do what we have always done, Jim. We will find hope in the impossible." And again, I mean, I think that speaks to this leap of faith, right? But throughout all of the things, I mean, it's kind of like the theme back in the first Kelvin timeline picture, where we see all this, or where we can see all the sort of timeline gymnastics that go on to get our characters where they need to be, get them on the right ship and in the right positions. Mm-hmm. In this one, we don't have that sense of where they're going to end up. We know what they need to get done, but there's all this disorientation in that film, and Justin Lin, who directed that film, applies this to his directorial style. The way he moves his camera. And I was actually reminded of this, actually, to call back to this week's Discovery episode. Tunde's camera movements, transitioning in the earlier parts of the episode. He'll turn the camera sideways and then cut and go into the next scene and turn it sideways from that same angle back a different direction. And I think
I picked up on that a couple of times. I'm not usually one to pick up on cinematography stuff, but I noticed a couple of times where it came in sideways.
Yeah, and Lynn does similar work to that. I mean, one of the criticisms that's been made of New Trek is how much they move the camera. They do a little too much sometimes. And I tell you, my buddy Jonathan Frakes was guilty. My buddy, the guy I love, Jonathan Frakes, was guilty of it in one episode in the second season. I was like, stop spinning the camera. But it can be overused. But I think Tunde used it really well in this episode, and I also think that Justin Lin used it really well in Discovery, where the audience feels disoriented. The audience feels, things are spinning and things are rocking and it's very loopy in places. And I feel like that was very intentional, because the theme of that film also is about this disconnectedness and then finding reconnection, and that we have to be able to sort of rescue our humanity out of the wreckage of Edison's humanity. Edison has lost his, and he's going to drag us down with him. And we've got to be able to rescue our humanity out of that. He's attacking the Yorktown, which is this globe in space, right? And when they first come up on it, Spock's talking about how it's meant to sort of, what is the line exactly? I don't remember, but it's to get past interplanetary tensions and whatever, and find a place of peace. Mm-hmm. and Bones looks at you and says, "That doesn't look tense to you? Looks like a damn snow globe in space about to break." Yeah, which I think is beautiful. But that's really what it is. I mean, there is a fragility to that piece. And I think we feel also in our contemporary context a fragility to our way of life, a fragility to, I would say in our country right now, we might feel a fragility of our system of government. We feel this sense that the things that we trust in, like the Enterprise in Beyond, which is literally decapitated, right, are broken or can be broken or on the verge of breaking or falling apart. And this is very much also what happens inside the postmodern shift, and why the postmodern shift occurs, is that we see the cracks and we see these structures that we used to depend on falling out from underneath our feet. And so the whole theme of Beyond, of Star Trek Beyond, which is one of the great Star Trek films, is getting our crew, is our crew finding one another and finding themselves and reconnecting, not only reconnecting with each other physically, but reconnecting with their purpose, reconnecting with their humanity. Jim, of course, again sort of reconnecting with his identity and his groundedness and who he is as his father's son. But also as his own man, now that he is a man, standing on his own 2 feet for the first time, really, as it said in the script. But yeah, I just that's the way I see. So I see that as very much an important theme in Star Trek Beyond, and many other places in Star Trek. But I think it's so important because of that thing that Gene Roddenberry said, that we do seek for connection so often, and we need it so badly, as sentient beings, as Michael says at the end of the third season of Discovery. We do need that connection, and we can find it. And remembering that truth, remembering that that's always real, no matter how lonely we get, no matter how long that loneliness lasts, that connection is possible. It really is possible. That's one of the hopes of human existence, and it's one of the needs that we have. So, I would encourage you, if you're listening and you feel lonely, to reach out. And also, if you maybe don't feel as lonely, don't keep that from letting you reach out. It can be scary. I think about Saru and Su'Kal, and I know I try to keep Discovery out of the last part, but I think about Saru and Su'Kal. It can be scary to invest your life in somebody else. It can be scary to find someone with a lot of need and say, I'll help you, because that's a commitment. Mm-hmm. And, you find somebody who's dealing with addiction. You find somebody who's been abused, or you find somebody who's just deeply lonely. There are so many people in this world who are just deeply lonely, and all they need is a friend. But it can even be hard just to be a friend to somebody, because it takes energy, and it takes commitment, and it takes time. And it's difficult when another person's need tends to kind of like define the relationship. But, that's something that people need to get through, and they need to be able to function beyond that. And the only way to do that is to love them through it. So I just encourage you to reach out, because connection is not only possible, it is necessary. And we are on this planet for one another. I think of I go back to this so often. One of the first pieces of scripture I learned as a brand new baby Christian when I was like 7 or 9 years old, whatever I was, is from a song. So that's how I got it in my head for the rest of my life. It's 1 John 4, 7 and 8. Beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. They that love not know not God, for God is love. And then the song repeats, Beloved, let us love one another. 1 John 4, 7 and 8. And and it's such a it's a dorky little kid song, but it's great. It's great that was ingrained in me so early on, because I think that's so important, that we love one another because God is love. Right? And everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Therefore, let us be born of God. Let us be intentional about being people who are born of God. Let us be intentional about being people who know God. And let us help others know God by loving them. Because loving someone else is giving them an opportunity to love. And gosh, isn't that just the most important thing that we're here to do as human beings on this planet? And it just also happens to be the thing that opens our heart to the creator and sustainer of this universe, who is and always will be the source and the culmination of every need and longing in our human hearts. So I just encourage you. I mean, it's such a big cosmic thing. It's always these big cosmic things that we talk about. But man, they're right there in the person next to you. And they're right there in a conversation, in an honest sharing of your heart with another person. It's not far away. You know, God is as cosmic and profound as one needs to be to sustain this entire universe. But that profundity, man, this is the theme I covered so much in Advent. That profundity, that grandeur, is as simple as a hand, is as simple as a kind eye. You remember in Discovery they said Gray has kind eyes. It's simple as kind eyes. It's as simple as a kind word to another human being. Choosing to be loving rather than to be selfish. Choosing to act in love rather than in fear. To take a step even though you're afraid. Man, that's what it's all about. I'm done.
Preach it, brother.
Here endeth the lesson.
Nice. So today's audience question comes from one of our listeners who wants to know, and I'm actually kind of keen on getting your opinion on this as well.
Okay.
With the introduction of all these holographic characters that we see on the Federation starbase, like I presume the writer is talking about like the two that were interviewing Giorgio and Eli and all those such. Do you think all that progress for holograms' rights that the Doctor fought so hard for on Voyager have been lost?
Whoa. Man, somebody out there pinged on holograms a couple of episodes ago, and
right.
But that's fine. I love it. I have wondered that myself to a degree, like when Osiro was looking over Eli, you know, and the way Vance was talking about him, I just thought, is this not a... Because there are holograms who are not sentient. I mean, there is that. And I'm really... Because we're going back to the Voyager episode Author, which is one of my favorites. Yes. And one of my favorites, you know, I feel like a lot of people have felt like it's a little bit of a riff on Measure of a Man, which it is.
Yeah.
But then again, so is The Offspring. And these are really great episodes. The Offspring, TNG with Data's daughter. And these are really great episodes. And I think it's plumbing the same depth and asking the same question about holographic entities. And, you know, the Doctor's pretty unique. The Doctor and yes. Vic, you know, are they the only sentient holograms that we have?
Well, but, I mean, we see don't we see in later episodes of Voyager where the ones that involve Barclay, right? Yeah. Where there's like all these, like the EMH model that the Doctor's based off of is relegated to like maintenance work.
That is still in the episode Author. That's at the end.
Is it?
That's at the end of the episode. Is kind of this revelation that there are basically like they're working in the mines kind of thing, you know, and that, you know, the sense that any other EMH that's out there, you know, would also be sentient or could also be sentient, is very strong in that episode, and that image of those hollows working, those EMHs working in that at the end of that episode, and then I'm flipping the page a little bit, but going into Picard and seeing all of the synthetics, right, who are working alongside humans, but they're not quite human, and they're not quite treated as human. Yeah, that really raises some questions, and I don't think those questions have been fully answered. And I think that's scary. It's really scary. The idea that we could be in a 32nd century where we haven't made progress, or we've made regress in the rights of holographic beings. So I think that's a good question, and I don't know the answer, But I did worry about that with Eli for sure. I don't know. What do you think, Tim? Do you?
Yeah, no, I'm going to have to agree with a lot of what you said. It really does feel like they're that they've regressed a bit with the way they're treating Eli, and I feel like with the hollows on Sukal's program as well. You know, like if they're potentially sentient creatures, mm-hmm. then to condemn them to life on this planet. Mm-hmm. How ethical was that for Sukal's mom to force that on them?
Right. So that's always the question. And you brought this up last episode, and I don't think I pinged on it quite as I should have. The idea that having or creating a holographic being is creating the potential for a sentient being, because who knows how that holographic program might evolve.
Right.
And that makes it scary to create a holographic character.
Yeah.
It would be very interesting to see if there's specific programming functions mm-hmm. that lead to the development of sentience, and we can.
Maybe that's what they figured out by now, and so they know how to not put in those algorithms.
Right. Maybe so. Which again. Still, I mean, it's like
figuring out what genes allow sentience and then removing those.
I mean, it's on the order of denying the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park the amino acid lysine, or in Gattaca, deciding manipulating genes of babies in utero and creating a class system based on who has mm-hmm. been specialized and who hasn't, and how special they've been made. Yeah, that's eugenics, which is outlawed in Star Trek. So, wow, I mean, when do we cross over into saying that some of the ways we deal with androids and with holographic entities actually are sort of digital eugenics? Mm-hmm. Man, I mean, it's a whole ethical can of spiders.
It's heavy.
Yeah, and I don't know what to do with it. I really don't. But
on that note.
But here's what I'll say: if we can think deeply about what it means to treat holographic and android beings fairly and respect their sentience, then maybe that can help us to think about some other beings who may be in our own species, but different enough mm-hmm. from us that we might think less of them, and how we might find ways to instead respect their humanity, respect the imago Dei, the image of God that is in them, and how do we treat that well, treat that right. So there's that.
Indeed.
So, yeah.
All right.
Good. Tim, what do we got going on next week?
Next week, we are going to do a Season 3 overview where we cover what we left behind.
Hey, that might be a good title. We'll see. But hey, I'm excited about it. I think that's good. We'll get to do that. We'll get to find some of the things that we left and didn't discuss. Like some of the things this episode that we wish we'd covered. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Dot 32, that didn't fly by us. We just forgot to cover it.
Didn't get there. That's what next week's all about. Some of the stuff that we wish we'd talked about in previous episodes. And to give us a kind of a flyover of Season 3. So, that's fantastic. I hope you will all join us, everyone. And in the meantime, please like, share, rate, comment, and subscribe. Also, send us your questions. Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter or on Facebook, or GospelTrekPodcast@gmail.com. We would love to discuss your question on the show. Tim, do you have anything else to say to the folks at home?
Well, I do, but it's not baked yet. So I don't want to serve up raw cookies because eggs
That's
it.
That's the PSA for this week, kids. Do not consume raw cookie dough. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here, and until next time.
I'm Tim Van Orden.
And I'm Kevin Sinise. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper.
See you next time!